Once upon a time. And the dragon was so fearsome that the king summoned all knights in his kingdom for a great tournament to determine how the dragon could be... Hey, can you say this more top down? What is the outcome of this story? Okay, fine. Sigurd the hero managed to kill the fearsome dragon and the kingdom could live on in peace. Now we are talking. Boring! Welcome to this video in which I'm going to help you improve your communication skills. First, I will teach you the difference between so-called top-down and bottom-up communication. Second, I will advise you on when to adopt which communication style for yourself. Third, I will share 3 practical exercises for you to improve your communication skills. My name is Jack. I spent 5 years as a consultant and project manager with McKinsey & Company and now serve as an independent management advisor. On this channel I share my business and consulting career advice with you, and now let's get started. Improving their communication skills is a key development goal for almost every new consultant. At the beginning of their careers, the great majority of consultants gets told in their feedback sessions that he or she needs to communicate more top-down. This is because most of us tend to naturally communicate in a way described as bottom-up. Let me illustrate in the following first what bottom-up communication actually means. Let us recall the standard structure of virtually every story we tell or fairy tale that we hear. It starts with a short beginning, followed by a complex middle part and ends with the end. In the business and consulting world, a common framework to approach a business problem is to split its description into 3 parts: the initial situation, complication, and eventually its resolution or conclusion. We can actually apply both these 2 frameworks to a little story from the beginning of this video. At the beginning, the situation had been that the kingdom's freedom was being threatened by a fearsome dragon. Unfortunately, the complication, it was really difficult to find a way to kill that fearsome dragon, and many attempts to do so failed. The resolution, finally, Sigurd the hero found a way to kill the dragon, allowing the kingdom to live on in peace. This is the standard way to tell a story from the beginning to the end. The basic principle of bottom-up communication is that you take your listener through all steps and details in chronological order that ultimately lead to your final end result or conclusion. Let me illustrate this by a second drastic example from the business world. Let us assume that you are a consultant serving a corporate client which is entering a crisis. The initial situation known to your project team is that recently revenues have dropped significantly. After some analysis, you and your team detect a serious complication. The company's costs have fallen by much less than its revenues, so that it is suddenly piling up losses. The conclusion or resolution is clear. If a company does not immediately reduce its cost, within 6 months from now it will go bankrupt. Again, also in this example, we went chronologically through the steps your project team has gone through to reach its conclusion. The client is at risk of going bust. There's an alternative and often more powerful way to communicate your approach to business problems, which is often preferred by top management consultants and business executives alike: top-down communication. Top-down communication means that you start by sharing the ending, the conclusion, your key message first, and only if there's time and interest left, you add the further and earlier details. In our business problem example, if one day the CEO of your client entered your team room for 5 minutes and asked, "Where do we stand?" you would want to alert her or him immediately by anticipating your current conclusion. If you do not find a way to reduce your cost immediately, you may go bankrupt within 6 months from now. You may be quite sure that by this you will have managed to gain the CEO's attention quickly, and he or she may be happy to spend an hour or so with you in your team room to understand all your analyses leading to that stark result. However, if you had started your statement by rehashing the company's initial situation, that revenues have dropped significantly, something well known to your client, the CEO may have left your team room indeed within 5 minutes over the disappointment of a lack of news. We can also apply the top-down communication approach to our little dragon story, which is what happened at the beginning of this video, where the consultant asked the storyteller to do just that. That implies that you start the story by communicating its end at the beginning. The dragon is dead and everybody is happy. You run a risk though that if you start your story like this, nobody anymore wants to listen to its beginning or middle part. Who wants to finish reading a book after having read the last 20 pages first? Boring! Very often, the principles of bottom-up and top-down communication are visualized by pyramids, because Barbara Minto, a McKinsey head coach in the 1970s and a godmother of top-down communication, has authored a world-famous book on this topic titled The Pyramid Principle. If you communicate bottom-up, you start your story or presentation from the details before you eventually lead your audience towards the top of your communication pyramid, your key message. If you decide to communicate top-down, you start from the top of the pyramid with your key message and then later provide your supporting evidence. Consultants love to communicate top-down. Why is this the case? Mainly for three reasons. First, it is time efficient. You help your communication partners, who usually are very smart, to understand where you currently stand without the need to go through all those nitty-gritty details that you had to go through yourself. Second, in the end, it normally is your conclusion that matters most, because this is what your client and your senior leadership need to act upon. Third, being able to communicate at any time of your project where you and your team truly stand forces your brain to continuously ensure that the analysis you're undertaking will ultimately contribute to deriving your end result. I would go so far to say that top-down communication belongs to the holy grails of the consulting world. And this is what McKinsey successfully hammered into my mind over my first year of my consulting career too. However, over time I learned that top-down communication is not always the communication style of choice. I argue that there are certain situations where a top-down communication approach yields you the better results, whereas I think there are other situations where you should stick to the more common bottom-up communication style. By the way, if you like this video so far, show your love and leave a like, since this helps YouTube to understand that it is worth watching it. Happily share and subscribe for further top quality business and consulting career advice. In the following, I am going to share my practical communication advice with you. Communicate top down when you interact with business executives and fellow consultants. We just discussed that. When there's an emergency, if a fire has broken out in a house, you want to get it extinguished first. When you call the fire service, you do not want to start the conversation by sharing all your speculations what may have caused the fire in the first place. Generally, communicate top-down in any situation where you have little time to speak and there's urgency. This applies to the first two scenarios. Go top-down when you are asked to introduce yourself, for instance during a job interview. A common trap of junior candidates is the reply to the request, "Tell me about yourself," by going from A to Z through a resume. I first went to primary school X, then did that, and so on. Introducing the essence of you in 2 to 3 sentences is an art and requires practice. Maybe one day I should dedicate an own video to it. For a quick example, go back to the beginning of this video to see how I try to introduce myself and this channel in just 2 to 3 sentences. When you promote a product or service, you want to communicate to a potential customer the end result he or she can expect first. Your local gym will tell you to sign up to reach your dream body. It will probably not bother you immediately with the nitty-gritty details on how to get there, with hard work and consistency. Now, let me share with you occasions during which you probably want to rely on a bottom-up communication approach. In the business context, it is often not the superior approach to talk top-down when you interact with middle management representatives of your client. In contrast to their CEO, they are used to work through the details within the responsibility of their department and create the necessary data reported to the top layers of the company. If you start the conversation with them by saying that if costs are not cut immediately, their company will go bankrupt within 6 months, well, this really may not serve as a nice conversation starter. You will probably just be perceived as the evil consultant wanting to fire everyone. When you are teaching somebody a skill, you very often want to communicate bottom up. If you start by anticipating the end result, your student may not understand how you got there. Even worse, if you share the correct answer to a math problem up front, your student may lose the motivation to find the answer him or herself. Instead, you want to pick your student up from the level of knowledge where he or she currently stands and pull them in baby steps towards the solution so that he or she can enjoy the motivating feeling of having solved the challenging task themselves. When you share a story or do a presentation, which actually is almost the same as telling a story, your communication style of choice should really depend on your intention and your audience. If you want to create suspense, take your audience on a journey with you, guiding it to unwrap step by step what you have discovered before, so that they cannot help but will ultimately reach the same conclusion that you had reached, leading to a joint agreement with your audience. When you have your first date with a lady or a gentleman, you probably do not want to communicate your desired end result too early. In most cases, you want to avoid overwhelming your crush with all your thoughts prematurely and rather take it a bit more slowly. And please stay bottom up when you have a beer with your buddies and there's no urgency. I sometimes got seriously upset when I met up in my leisure time with fellow McKinsey consultants who would communicate about their private life in the same way they talk business. Guys, switch off and be normal again when the time allows. Finally, you want to find out over time the preferred or default communication style of your conversation counterparts and adapt to it. For instance, I often realize this when I tell a story to my mother. She does not like to be kept in suspense when I share an exciting story and rather prefers to be told the end first. By the way, there's another scenario where you may want to stick to bottom-up communication. When there are details that truly matter and just cannot be left out. For instance, what if in our dragon story there was a necromant in the kingdom who was able to resurrect dead dragons to recreate even more fearsome undead dragons? I told you at the beginning of this video that as a consultant you will need to master the skill of top-down communication, and you can hone that skill. I would like to close this video by suggesting to you 3 exercises to help you improve your communication skills. I've put them on this slide so that we can read through them together. First, consider some stories you regularly share about yourself. Observe what is your default communication style and try to narrate these stories by adopting the other communication style. Second, the next time you give a presentation, actively consider which communication style you want to choose. Take a conscious decision, experiment with the styles and experience how your audiences react to them differently. Over time, this will help you to calibrate your communication. Third, the next time you listen to a story or a presentation, actively scan for clues revealing which communication style the presenter seems to prefer. Use these clues to mirror the presenter's communication style during your next conversation with the presenter to build a better connection between the two of you. And pick one exercise at a time. I hope you found this video useful. If so, please leave a like, feel free to share and subscribe for further top quality business and consulting career advice. All the best, Jack.